Well, Charmer, we're back. That's right. Another episode of Ice Cave Radio, the first of the new year and the first for a little while. It's been a little bit. We've been busy with holidays, with being ill, with lots of other stuff going on. But I'm happy to say it looks like things will be a little bit more consistent from here on out. We're back. We're back, everyone. Sorry about the delay. Wow, there's so much to talk about. First of all, it's just been a while. But also, there's been so much news coming out recently. But before we get into that, how is your holiday season, Charmer? And how is 2025 treating you so far?
The holidays were pretty good. We didn't do a whole lot. We had typical family obligation stuff, but I didn't do like a lot of traveling to see extended family, that sort of thing. So that was nice. I do feel bad because the activities that we did have kind of ate into the days where I would normally go to my locals. So I feel like I haven't been to my locals in forever. And this would have been the first weekend. This past weekend would have been the first weekend that I could have went, but my son's been kind of acting out. He's hitting that preteen age. And so we ended up not going. And I can't go this weekend. I'll be traveling for a Flesh and Blood event that's going to be in Prague. So the holidays were good, but I also got sick. Well, kind of my whole family did. My wife caught some sort of viral bug. We went to urgent care, tested negative for COVID, tested negative for the major flu strains, but she had a really bad respiratory thing. I have felt awful off and on really for like a week now. So it was a good holiday season, kind of a rough start to 2025 just in terms of health, but I'm really excited to settle in, especially after this weekend. Once I get my travel out of the way, I'm kind of like fully locked in on Star Wars for a bit because I have a planetary qualifier coming up. I have a store showdown coming up, so I'm going to jam a lot of games. I'm very excited about it and just ready to get back to a sense of normalcy in general.
See, I'm glad everyone's feeling a little bit better. I'm also a little bit jealous that you have a little bit more time before your planetary qualifier, because mine was last weekend, and I went into it with, I would say, virtually no practice. I practiced a little bit with some of my locals. We jammed some webcam games and things like that. I wasn't able to make it to a lot of locals in the last month or so, again, because of family stuff, because of holiday stuff and all that. And travel. I was out doing Bandai Card Game Fest, casting some of those games and all that. And so it's just, a lot of stuff going on. I ended up on Cad Bane Tarkentown, which is a ton of fun to play. I love that deck, and I played a decent amount of Cad Bane back in set 2, so I kind of wanted to go with something that wasn't Sabine, because I played Sabine to death in set 1, and I wanted to go with something that was still on the aggressive side, but not super low to the ground, something that was a little bit more in the middle range, and the deck was performing well in tournaments, and I thought it'd be fun, and I went 1-3 and dropped, and obviously the results were not what I was looking for, but it was really like that feeling where my fundamentals are good, but the little nuances, the little turn-to-turn decisions, there was one game where I lost a best of 3 because I didn't attack with a Crafty Smuggler one turn. That entire series went down to that one decision at the very beginning of game 2, and because I ended up losing game 2 by 2 life on their base. And then I ended up losing game 3 against a Quinlan Red. Yeah. And so it's I'm not mad or anything like that. It's a little bit disappointing, but it's fascinating to go back and look. And this is one of the reasons why I love Star Wars Unlimited so much, is that every little decision counts in the way that this game plays out in the action system, that I could go back and track through the game and be sure, there were bad things that happened later, but it all goes back to one turn at the beginning of the game where I was pretty sure he had a way to take out my Crafty Smuggler that didn't have a shield anymore, and I had McClunky in hand, and I elected to McClunky it and take out something on his board to try to get the value there because I didn't think I'd have the opportunity. And it turned out he didn't have the way to take it out. I could have attacked for 2 damage and still been fine, and that's the 2 damage I needed. And so thinking about that, it still, I think, was the right decision in the moment, because the chances were very high that he would have been able to remove it before I got the value. But in reality, ended up being the wrong decision because I could have attacked and all that. So anyway, it was fun going back and analyzing some of those games. I had a great time. I met a lot of awesome players. It was up in Pasadena at Odyssey, a great shop. really big, very open. Thankfully, the smoke wasn't too bad, and everyone had a great time. And Han Tarkentown won. In fact, if you're just listening to this now, I got to do an interview with the winner, Matthew, of that planetary qualifier. It's up on the channel right now, and it's really, really fascinating. So go back and watch that. So yeah, I wish I had another one to play in, coming up, because I feel like I could come and do more practice. Might take a different deck, I don't know. But at the end of the day, I had fun playing. I'd never intended to win it anyway, and so it was a good time. It was worth it in the end. So that was my experience coming into this one. But man, what are you thinking about bringing to your planetary qualifier? I'm curious now.
I am stuck between two lists that both I think feel pretty good, and I'm comfortable piloting them. The problem is that one is more consistent, but being consistent, it has like the known flaws, and the other one is, I think, harder to pilot, but can be more rewarding when you get it right. So I am kind of stuck between a Yoda control list and an Iden control list.
Okay.
I really like Iden Red right now, specifically because there is a healthy amount of it's kind of like a ping-centric meta, right? There's a healthy amount of like just one damage here, whatever there. Playing Iden Red like as a control means that I get a lot of either high health units or units with shields, things that just kind of are a little bit more resilient. Right. And because the game is kind of like ping-centric, the incidental health gain from Iden feels, I think, better right now than, say, playing a Krennic or a Kira. Doesn't mean that you can go wrong with those choices either, but it just feels really good. And it's very consistent. It's just that some of the bad matchups are also consistently bad, and that has me worried. The Yoda list is, I think, much harder to pilot because there is a lot of sequential decision making, right? When do I use the hero ability? When do I not? When do I deploy Yoda? It's not always correct to deploy the leader on 7. You might want to save it for, especially in control mirrors, when you can stack something on the top of your deck and get rid of an Avenger without having to pay into it, that sort of thing, right? So it is very difficult, and I want more reps on it before I decide whether or not for sure I want to take it, because I think if I had more reps, I would take that for sure. But with the travel I have coming to going to Prague coming up this weekend and so forth, I don't know how many more reps I'm going to get before my PQ, which is on February 1st. But those are the two I'm between right now.
You heard that Yoda Command took second in that planetary qualifier in LA, right? In Pasadena.
Yes. So I knew that Yoda commanded. I am on Yoda Red, Yoda Tarkentown,
I think a lot of
for
people
my control list.
Yeah. Apparently, this guy though was a diehard Tarkin player, and so he really just loved decks that let him peek at the top card and kind of manipulate that top card stuff. And so when Yoda came out, he immediately switched over and has just been grinding Yoda since the set came out. So I watched him play; he's phenomenal. And yeah, got all the way to the finals with a Yoda Command.
Yeah, I know I've played against you with some early versions of the list. I made some changes since then, but I do similarly. I find a lot of value, especially when you're playing control, in peeking, manipulating, digging for whatever answer you need. A lot of times, like, the way you lose as controls if you just don't have the right answer at the right time.
Right.
And between Yoda and I'm running the set 1 R2D2 is a nice 1-drop, and those two together mean that you can dig very deep into your deck very fast.
Yeah.
And just kind of load you with whatever it is you need for the matchup. So that's also why I think the reps matter, because I need to know what I need for each matchup, and that takes time.
Yeah, let me know. We'll get some games in. We'll get you. We'll try to get you trained up a little bit here. We'll see around the travel anyway. But let's move on, because man, we got just a ton of news to talk about here. So I'm gonna switch us over to the other screen right away. And the first thing I think to talk about is let's see. I actually forgot to add the image in. Let me do that real quick here. Hold on. Let's see.
Is this about the announcement?
Which one?
Well, because we're talking about planetary qualifiers, so I thought you were gonna transition into sectors and regionals potentially.
This image is huge. Okay, there we go. The first thing I actually want to talk about was one of the things that came out with the Game Genic announcement. They were doing a bunch of announcements, some really cool deck boxes, especially some Twin Suns centric deck boxes, which I think is really awesome. Great play mats. You get hyperfoil of some of the normal bases back from set 1. with some of those boxes too, which is neat. But I want to talk about this one specifically. I wanted your opinion on it because this life counter has become a little bit divisive in the community following the discussion since the stream. And the main reason for that is because the health is in the upper left part of the counter, right? And you slide your card in there. Now, the issue that I noticed right away, and that other people are picking up on this, in a game that wants you to count up, covering the base health is a problem, right? Because in a game, you kind of want to see what the number is you're trying to get to, because it does change in Star Wars Unlimited. So this is a counter that feels like it's designed to count down, but it's designed for a game that was designed to count up. So I saw the suggestion of just flipping it around so that the number is in the lower right and it's facing your opponent and you can still read it just fine. I think that's probably what I would do if I got this, because I do think it's a really cool life counter. I think it's neat, but yeah, I mean, like, I kind of don't like that it's in the upper left. I wish they would have put the number somewhere else. What do you think?
I mean, as weird as it sounds, I have a lot of thoughts about something so small. One, I don't think that you can just rotate it and put it in the bottom because your number orientation is going to be off.
Right. Well, that's what I said, is that it would be right set up for your opponent, which is fine. And then you'd be able to read it too, which, like, it's kind of awkward, but whatever.
I guess.
Yeah.
But so first of all, my initial reaction was that I do agree with you. It absolutely looks like it's meant to count down. And the problems with that is that when you are, sending a message to newer players, then they're going to have that natural question of, can I overheal my base? That's one of the reasons I always liked the idea of putting damage counters on, because that just sends the clear signal of, like, can you take more damage off your base right now? No. Well, there's your answer, right?
Yeah.
This, it kind of requires you to know what the starting health of your base is and then know the game mechanics. Now, you could say, hey, somebody who's buying something like this has probably played the game enough to understand that, but I don't like the intuitiveness there. But the other thing that jumped out to me, because it also says future proof, right, is that clearly this is signaling at some point there could be the potential for bases with more than 30 health, or there could be bases that don't have the starting health set in stone. So what I mean by that is that you might have a base that starts with 35 health and then says at the start of the game, put 5 damage counters on this, or 7 damage counters.
Oh, that's a cool idea. I like that.
When you talk about the future proofing, this would then play into that. And you are still covering what the max is, but you have the ability to go up. Whereas with the damage counters, like, you have to start with them on, and not that you can't do that mechanically, but that was something that kind of came to my mind because I saw the future proof and I was like, yeah, that, if you're playing a vigilant or a restore centric deck, that would be an interesting design space, right? Where you can overheal, but you start with damage on your base and then just no other effects, that sort of thing.
I think the other two things that jumped out at me too is that with the future proofing is that I wonder if maybe eventually we're going to see, like, Twin Sun specific bases that have more health. Like, maybe once the card pool gets large enough, maybe we start everybody at 40 or something like that. Maybe the core rules kind of change at some point, and this kind of helps future proof against that. I think there's also just sort of the basic, logic is that you're making a counter for Star Wars Unlimited, but you kind of want to make it in a way where people can use it for other card games too. So I think including that is probably, got that in mind a little bit too, is that you want to make it usable in more than just one game, even if it is marketed specifically for one game. I get that from GameGenic side. That makes a lot of sense. But like I said, I love the look of this. I think it's really neat. I like spin down counters. Or spin up counters in this case. Although I really have gotten used to putting just tokens on the base to the point where I kind of enjoy it. And so I really love this counter, but I want to switch where the number is. I really want to leave the base health on the card exposed. And so I really would love to see a version of this where they switch it to the bottom right or bottom left. And honestly, they haven't released it yet. You could just swap the numbers around on the dials and then make it so that that's the way it goes, right? I mean, you don't really have to change a ton of the engineering for this to do that. So I wonder if maybe that's a change they'll be able to make. I'd like to see that happen. But either way, it's been a point of conversation, so I wanted to bring that up.
One other piece of feedback, and this is somebody who's coming from the stance of, I use the acrylic GameGenic tokens, and I've bought from Etsy some of those 3D printed, like very nice holders.
Yeah.
And the appeal of those holders are that they fit perfectly in the deck box drawers. So looking at the card size for this, my other concern is that this won't fit in the deck box well.
Yeah.
And to me, that was the entire appeal, was taking all of my Star Wars stuff and making sure that it fit in my deck box. So that is the other potential detraction for me as a customer. I
totally
like
agree.
the design. I don't know how you get over that hump in terms of sizing it to fit the card, but that was the other thing that had crossed my mind, is like, well, I'd have to carry this and the deck box, and it would be loose in the bag and blah, blah, blah.
No, I think that's a really valid concern too. A lot of people, when they go to locals, they want to make sure their bag is as tight as possible, right? As far as like everything's in the exact right space it is. It's easy to get to because you're moving from seat to seat during the course of a local evening, right? You want to make sure that nothing goes astray. Heaven forbid someone's going to try to grab something. You want to make sure that you can easily track everything in your bag the entire night. And this does kind of make that a little bit more challenging too. So I'm curious how this will do. I think it's a neat idea. I think the design needs a little bit of tweaking. And like you said, I think there's some other kind of concerns some people might have about picking it up. But I think it's a neat addition to sort of the line of products we have around this game. And it overall, it has been really cool to see everything Game Genic has come up with to work with Star Wars Unlimited. That's been really convenient, like the deck boxes with the leader sliding in there.
Yeah.
Like I play other card games that have leaders too, and everyone's like, where did you get that deck box? Because I use all the Star Wars ones for those games too, because I go to multiple locals every week usually, so I just kind of use the same box for different games. And so a lot of people are like, oh, we want that for our game too. So they're really doing well with a lot of the design on this stuff. But this piece in particular, I'm a little bit unsure about. But we'll see how it goes. Anyway, anything else from the Game Genic stream stand out to you?
No, I mean, you already covered it. I liked that they were coming out with some of the Twin Suns focused soft crates. I liked the revisiting of set one commons, right? Because again, it's just this aesthetic. So it's just a nice way. I was gonna say way to kind of just say like, hey, you might have already bought some of our other stuff, but if you do pick this up, then you get a nice, additional piece, but it's not like game breaking if you don't get them. And some people might just want the box and don't care, and so they can also buy the set and then maybe sell or trade the thing to people who do care and kind of recoup some of the cost back. So overall, I just think that piece is also nice.
Yeah, totally agree. The other thing that stood out to me was the Twin Suns playmat, the big 4-player playmat. I definitely want one of those, but I don't have a very consistent Twin Suns play group around here actually, so I need to get that going before I pick that up, I think. But either way, you can go watch that. It was Xander, and I forget the name of the Game Genic individual. Apologies there, but they go through a lot of this stuff. It's a fun stream to watch. Go check that out. It came out earlier this week, I think it was. But let's move on to the really exciting news that came out today, which is sector and regional qualifiers. They've been talking about this for a long time, but today we got some real concrete news for it, and some news that they were saying this stuff is going to happen in 2025. So kind of waiting on the dates now, because I want to be there, right? And one of the reasons I want to be there is because some of the prizing that you're going to get. They said in the article that the sector qualifiers, which is what this image is from, are going to be able to host about 1,000 players, and the participation card is that Obi-Wan alt art on the right, which I think looks awesome. I love sort of the it's kind of the lines that you'd see in sort of like, they have the big panels in Star Wars where you're tracking like galactic locations of things and all that. It's that kind of vibe. I really, really like it.
Yeah. Or it kind of reminded me of some of the like targeting screens in like the X-Wings and whatever, when they're like trying to line up before. So yeah, I dig it. And I'm with you. The participation prizes are great. And then I believe the Kylo is just for day 2 people, right?
Yeah, the Kylo and the Matt is for, Matt's obviously for top 8, but the Kylo one is for, I think it's like top 64 is when you start earning those. I have to go back and double check. But yeah, that one's for, doing better in the tournament. But I think Obi-Wan's still a card you definitely see pop up in decks. So I like to see them doing alt arts of cards that are in decks, right? Because I feel like we've gone through a little bit period of time where the cards have been a little bit less common in some of the meta decks. And I think what's really exciting for people is seeing the cards that they play on a daily basis. So I think Obi-Wan definitely fits in that category, and I'm excited about that one. It's neat. Yeah, and I'm also excited about regional qualifiers. There you go. That beautiful Admiral Piet map, which we now know is the art from the leader card, the Admiral Piet leader that we're going to check out a little bit later in the show. We've got a lot of set 4 spoilers to discuss here. But then same deal where the Emperor Palpatine, though, is going to be the one that gets released to people as a participation thing. And then the Ray is what you earn through doing well in the tournament. But great art on the Palpatine one. The art's great on all the stuff in general. And again, it's just really exciting to see cool promos come with this. And the regional qualifiers are saying it's going to be like 2,000 people potentially. So that'll be real big. But I'm just excited about more gigantic Star Wars Unlimited events I can go to and play in and maybe cast. We'll see. But either way, it's going to be a lot of fun.
I'm right there with you. I love this Palpatine art. This might be my favorite Palpatine art that they have done so far. Obviously, he's had a number of cards in the game, some various versions. Up until now, I think his showcase leader from set 1 was my favorite, but I just really like the framing, love the way that it looks, highlights the the eyes, the Force lightning really well. I also really liked this Rey, and I know this is going to sound weird, but I liked this Rey simply because her blade looks extra fat in the art, and it kind of gives me the vibe of like a Claymore version of a lightsaber, right? Like just a good thick sword. And I don't know why, but I really like that. But also, and it's a subtle thing, I just like that the glow of the lightsaber is very well highlighted on her face in this art piece, right? So like it's just got some good, I think anyway, like lighting and dimensionality to it.
Yeah, it's neat that the saber extends beyond the just art box too on the card and covers up like the little bit, it almost covers up the unit side of things and all that. I bet these are going to look really good in foil. I'm very curious what the foiling is going to be for these because, they're not going to be flat. They're obviously going to have some sort of foiling, but, we both played Flesh and Blood, and the cold foiling they do in that game is so good. And for me on the Bandai side of things, there's some really excellent foiling that's done. And so I want to see something kind of on that level from Star Wars Unlimited as well. Curious what we're going to see.
Give me the Marvels.
Yeah, the Marvels, right? Curious what we're going to see in the Carbonite versions of that stuff that are going to come out in those packs later. So I'm excited about a year of new levels of foiling for this game too, because I am a sucker for a shiny card. Even though I'm not a big alt art person, if I get it from promos, I'm happy about that.
I'm right there with you. I have a really bad crow brain. I like the shiny.
Yeah, that's understandable. Yeah. So anyway, that's some info about the sector and regional qualifiers that's come out, long awaited, and now we know. And so it's going to be pretty hype to get our hands on some of this stuff. And
I'm just so shocked it's going to be this year. I thought for sure we weren't going to see any of. Well, I guess maybe I thought later this year. I didn't think we were going to see any of these until after the first Galactic Championship.
So too, and that might still be true because 2025 can still be after this. Although they did say in the article too that doing well in some of these events are going to give you tickets to day 2 of the Galactic Championship. So I assumed they meant the one in that's happening this year, but I'm not.
Yeah. Well, so the other bit that stood out to me, sorry, I'm pulling up the article again right now because they said really specifically sector qualifiers for season 0 begin in April, and there will be 4 of them before the Galactic Championship.
Oh, okay.
So we already know for sure they're going to be ahead. That was not what I was expecting. I thought we might get our first one of these after year 1's GC, since we know that's a big open.
Right.
So I'm super excited for this.
I can't complain. I think
there's going to be 2 regionals. Those begin in May, and there's going to be 2 of them before the Galactic Championship.
Well, the more the merrier. So yeah, we're going to look forward to those. Either I think I'm going to have to start to save some travel stuff.
Yep, me too.
Yeah,
me too.
And maybe practice a little bit more. Well, I'll come into these a bit better than the better prepared than the planetary qualifier from last week. But you know what helps prepare? Charmer. Looking spoilers.
No one. Yeah, I was gonna say knowing what's gonna be playable by then.
That's right. So we have spoilers to check out, and I am so excited about the first one. I just dragged all the images and threw them in a file, and it gave us Admiral Piet for the first one. So it's not necessarily in the order in which they were revealed. It's the order in which the file decided to do it. But we have a command leader, which I'm excited about. I love playing double command. And it is a capital ship leader. Finally, we have a leader that is capital ship centric and maybe will help us play out those Star Destroyers. Maybe, just maybe, have a Star Destroyer centric deck. It certainly looks like it because as an action, exhaust Admiral Piet, commanding the Armada. Play a capital ship unit from your hand. It costs 1 less. Do you want a 3/5 on turn 1 of the game? Well, you can do that now by playing Outlaw Corona for 2. It's scary, but it's possible. And then if you have 5 resources, deploy the leader. And his on his deploy side, each capital ship unit you play costs 2 less. He's a 2/7 that flips on 5, so he's fairly durable for the most part. And you come out a turn before rivals fall, unless there's ramp involved on the other side. So you might be able to get some value out of this. So you'll be able to play, potentially flip him, and then on your 5 resource turn, play a 7 cost something. Or if you've ramped, play an 8 cost something, which does get us into the range of a lot of really, really big, scary stuff. So this is the first leader I've seen revealed where I'm like, okay, there might be some serious power here. What do you think?
I really like this. I was immediately shocked at just how clean it is because, as you said, there are some cheaper capital ships like the Outlaw Corona. Obviously, the impactful ones come later. But what stood out to me was the 7 health. What I think is interesting about this leader is that a lot of the really good capital ships are at 8 or 9, right? And so when you think about the real all-stars at 9, like Avenger, you kind of create this game scenario where you might be playing a bit of chicken in the later stages of the game where your opponent might have access to a rival's fall and they know that you are looking to deploy your admiral. And so you have this back and forth where it's like one of you takes an action to see if the other one spends resources and then you can deploy your leader or vice versa. Because I suspect we are going to see this leader C play, but also would expect this leader to not always deploy on 5. I think that this is one where you're going to hold it for when you need it. And that might be still on 5 because you might need the body, but it also might be one where the game state allows you to wait until, resource turn 6 or 7 so that you can slam your Avenger. But even without those, right? Like I would say that there's also just a lot of power in playing like Ruthless Raider a turn early.
Yeah.
Right. If you talk about the ramp thing, if you resupply early and then you can deploy Admiral on your, what would be normal resource turn 4, but instead you have 5 and now you're able to deploy a Ruthless Raider when your opponent's on 4 resources. That's a pretty good play.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely going to want to ramp. The question is he going to be double green? Is he going to be something that fits in with more Star Destroyers, green, blue, green, red, something like that? I think there's a lot of interesting brewing you can do with him. And you have to keep in mind, too, that his flip leader ability does essentially pay for an aspect penalty, too. So if you're going a little bit later in the game, you can play something off aspect, and this will pay for if it's red but you're running blue, or whatever, if it's blue and you're running double green. So I think there's a lot of interesting stuff to think about theory crafting with Admiral Piet here. But I'm just glad that we've got a capital ship leader. I think it's really, really neat. So what a way to kick off spoilers. I'm very, very hyped about this leader. This set is going to be so fun. And the art is great, by the way, with this. I think the art is great. He looks sinister. He looks evil. There's like a really beautiful image of the Death Star back there. It's like the Death Star got more detail than like everything else in this card, but it looks really good. So just great art really good as well. Wait, that's Wedge. I want to go back to the big arm. Oh, it's cut off there. Oh, well. All right. Next, go ahead. Tell us about Wedge.
All right. So Wedge Antilles, leader of the Red Squadron, is a leader. It is command and heroism. On the leader side has rebel and pilot tags. Also says as an action, you can exhaust your leader to play a card from your hand using piloting. It costs 1 less. So again, jump to Lightspeed. The piloting mechanic is that there are a number of units that can be played as a ground unit or as an upgrade onto a vehicle. Now that part's also important because it doesn't have to be a space unit. It's just any vehicle. But this allows you to ramp that. Now, epic action is on 5 or more resources, just like Admiral. So you can deploy him as a leader or as an upgrade when you hit that 5 resources. And if you deploy him as a unit, it's just a 3/6 ground unit with rebel and pilot as the tags. Not a lot to write home about, but again, sometimes that might be the right play. However, if you do it as a pilot, the attached unit is a leader unit, but it gains on attack. The next pilot card you play this phase costs 1 less. This includes piloting costs, but that's important because we may have some cards that have the pilot tag that are not necessarily upgrades, right? And so in that case, this would still apply.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. And I like it when things are left open rules-wise to include a lot of different card options and different kind of like play patterns. So it's a neat card for sure. +3/+4 is a lot of stats to give to something too, because this does flip on what, 5, right? Yeah, 5.
Yeah.
So that's just a lot of stats. Makes things cheaper. This is going to be your leader, I think, to look at in limited if you're going to grab a lot of ships on the heroism side. I think, making your stuff cheaper is just a great way to go when you're playing in a limited environment. So while I think it could be, middling in strength and constructed, and maybe I'll eat my words with that, it probably could still be strong there too. I think I'm really going to look for this leader in limited in my sealed, events going into set 4. And then if I draft a little bit later, I think he's going to be one that's going to be easy and strong to build around. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned draft, because I really think that that's potentially where it's going to shine the most. It's a card that doesn't give you a ton of value unless you very specifically have the piloting cards, because the front side is only a discount when you're playing the piloting stuff, right? As a leader, it's any way you deploy the card. So when you are drafting, you're going to want to make sure that you can pick up a critical mass or enough to make your leader worthwhile in that regard. Whereas in sealed, you just might not be fortunate enough to open enough of those cards. So it's going to be a little bit more hit or miss. And when we talk about constructed, I do see a path where this could be still a very playable leader. I think that it might have polarized matchups, because decks that can ensure you just never have units consistently, right? Because again, that front side, you have to play the upgrade at the discount, right? So if you play a unit, your opponent answers by removing it 1-for-1. So think like blue control, then this leader might struggle. But against other decks, this could be very good. Like this could be a really good into mid-range list where you're just overpowering them, that sort of thing. So I think draft is where Wedge will shine, but I do just like the design overall.
Yeah, it is important to note too, on the leader side, it has a red piloting keyword, and on the flipped leader side, it is a black piloting trait. So that will make things different from time to time. But I need to see another leader come into it. It's cool that we see heroism and villainy kind of discount pilot leaders or discount space-oriented leaders, Him and Piet seem to sort of like do our two sides of the same coin. Moving on, we've got... I'm so excited about this leader, actually, because he's wacky. And why wouldn't he be? It's Admiral Akbar. It's a trap is the subtext. Are they trying to tell us that as a deck building thing? Or is it just, it's his iconic line? But let's read him real quick. He's heroism, cunning, action, pay 1 resource, exhaust a non-leader unit. If you do, its controller creates an X-Wing token, which we know are 2/2 space vehicle tokens. And then if you control 6 or more resources, deploy this leader. He is a 3/8 on the ground. Rebel and official are the traits. And then on attack, you may exhaust a unit. If you do, its controller creates an X-Wing token. So on his leader side, you can exhaust leaders as well. It just says leader, not non-leader. But when I look at this, I think to myself, I don't really want to give my opponent X-Wings. But if I make an X-Wing, if I exhaust like something I don't care about for myself, like I play like some small, just Sentinels or whatever, and at the beginning, I exhaust that, I make an X-Wing, then I exhaust my own X-Wing and make another X-Wing, then, every turn for 1 resource, I'm making a 2/2 in space. And if my opponent doesn't have a way to deal with that, eventually I'm just going to build up this big amount, and I can put pilots on them. I can do all sorts of stuff with it. So I think Akbar could end up being this really, really quirky, interesting sort of control type list where I'm kind of like exhausting my own tokens to make more tokens and then overwhelming my opponent by putting stuff on them. And then if I ever do need to exhaust something important on their side, I can. And then one of my previously created tokens can just run into that, right? So I think there's really, really interesting potential with this leader, and he's not going to be easy to play. Don't get this, like, no joke. This is going to be a difficult leader to play well, but I think he's got one of the higher like skill expression ceilings I've seen in the set so far. So I'm very excited about it. Maybe I'm crazy, but I'm hyped about this leader.
I actually really love this leader. I'm sure it's going to come up as we go through the spoilers, but there's a card that pairs well with his, play style, which I also just love that they played into the theming in general. Mm-hmm. But I am currently moderately excited is I think the way that I would say it. And okay. I'm waiting until I hear a ruling, and then I might be incredibly excited. So specifically in Star Wars Unlimited, a lot of times you can play cards and then you have to do as much of the card as you can. What I need to know is if I target my own stuff, does the unit have to be readied for me to still make the X-Wing? Or can I exhaust one of my units that's already exhausted and still make the token?
I'm pretty sure you'd have to be able to exhaust it because there's the if you do part.
Yeah, if you do makes me think it has to be a readied unit. But if that 99% is
sure it does, yeah.
Something that matters. Well, because on the flip side, right, you're right, it's not non-leader. Does also still have the if you do though, which makes me think that you still have to have the ready unit, because otherwise when he attacks you could also just always target it himself, right? It doesn't say another unit, it's just a unit.
Right.
But when I first read this and I thought about like those base rules where like you have to do as much of the card as you can, I was like, man, that's really strong.
Yeah.
But if you do makes me think it has to be a ready unit. But even with that being said, there are, I still think, on a lot of use cases where this is better than he looks.
Oh, he's so good. This leader is going to be extremely good, I think.
Yeah.
Again, maybe I'm crazy.
Limited, so he's a common leader, right? Yeah. In limited, your ability to just shut down big units at the expense of like, I gave you a 2/2. That's sometimes totally worth the trade-off, right? Especially for just one resource and exhausting your leader every turn. Like, I'd much rather have my space units crash into a 2/2 than deal with your 7/7 every turn. You know what I mean? That already is a powerful ability, but also the number of times where, I might have like a 1/1 and like, I'll spend the action to get that 1 damage on base, especially in limited. But if I can just turn that into more units, then that's incredible. And when you go to the constructed side and you start talking about deck building, knowing that you're always giving them an X-Wing token, as weird as this sounds, I could see a situation where you build your deck to control the ground on purpose, and then you just run a bunch of like bombing runs for the space arena.
Yeah, you could.
Like, you're going to give them a ton of units, and you're just like, okay, well, I'll just clear them out periodically, but you'll never own the ground, right? I don't know. I dig it. I love everything about this.
I still love the idea of playing Sentinels in the early game and then exhausting your own Sentinels because they still have to run into them because they're Sentinels, and then creating your own X-Wing tokens. And then it's like, okay, so then I'll exhaust my X-Wing token the next turn to make another X-Wing token. So the natural response people have been giving me is like, what if they just kill your X-Wing token? I'm like, well, that's great because I spent one resource, and then they dedicated cards into handling my not cards, my tokens, right?
Yeah.
So I'm still coming out ahead, in that scenario. So that's okay. I want them to be spending their resources dealing with my tokens when I'm just like, I can just keep creating them all game, right? And also like put other stuff out there. It's only one resource to do this. It's a fairly cheap cost.
This is a leader that loves cards like Concord Dawn Interceptors, loves Bright Hope. Bright Hope is also great because you could, you lose the token, but if you need to in a pinch, you could just bounce one of the tokens you've created for almost nothing and draw a card if you need to. Like,
doesn't Bright Hope only bounce ground units?
Maybe I thought it was cost oriented.
I haven't played that card for a little while. It's
you're right. It's
you may return a friendly non-leader ground unit. There you go. Yeah. So you'll be able to bounce your X-Wing tokens, but you could bounce.
You can still.
Well, I think you're onto something there, right? Though, because you could play a Sentinel on the ground, and then they do some damage to it. You bounce with Bright Hope, and then you play it again, and you've essentially healed it, right? Exhaust it, make a token, bounce it. Yeah. No. So I think there's still a lot of potential with what you're saying too. Yeah.
I like Akbar.
I like Akbar a lot. I did tweet I'm an Akbar main when this card was revealed. Although now that Piet's revealed, I'm like, man, I don't know. And Wedge looks fun too. Like everything just looks great in this set. I don't know. I'm gonna have a really hard. I've already had a hard time deciding what leader to play. I'm gonna have such a hard time deciding when this comes out. What are you doing to this to me, Fantasy Flight? Tell us about the Fleet Interdictor. Let's talk about another capital ship here.
I'm really excited to talk about this one because of Admiral Piet. So Fleet Interdictor is a 7-cost space unit. It is Villainy and Vigilance. It is a 6/6 Imperial Vehicle capital ship. It has Sentinel and also has, when defeated, you may defeat a space unit that costs 3 or less. So this is something that essentially says, I want to rule the sky. I'm going to get in the way of something big, and I'm going to take something small with it. And it's a 7 cost, and that's very key because, as we were talking about Admiral, if you deploy on 5 and then can ramp into something that costs 7, and this just perfectly costs 7, you're in a good spot. Yeah. So I do still think Piet will likely find a home, whether it's with red and you're trying to go towards the new, Devastator, or blue and you're trying to go towards this and then maybe Avenger. I love this card. This card is also a common, and I cannot stress enough how much of a bomb in limited this is going to be.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's a Sentinel with an upside. Then if you get Piet, I think if you get Piet and you get this, you're like, all right, well, I know what I'm playing. It's such a strong combo. But I did do a double take when I saw this as a common as well. It's kind of crazy. And big ships are neat, I would say it's a Star Destroyer, Yeah. I would say, even though it doesn't say that. I guess we don't have Star Destroyer as trait. We just have capital ship, which is interesting. I wonder why we don't have Star Destroyer as trait.
Well, because I would argue that if you have the pair of tags, Imperial plus capital ship, then you're a Star Destroyer in my mind. Like, it's just the joining of those two.
Generally, that's the case. That's true. Fair enough. Let's move on to our first heroism card, Cassian Andor. Well, besides Akbar. It's a 3-cost villainy, heroism, pilot character.
Vigilance.
What did I say? Villainy?
You said villainy, heroism, and I've
got villainy on the brain, I guess, right now.
I know.
Vigilance, heroism. I'm like freaking out our listeners who can't see the card right now. They're like, what? Oh my gosh. No, it's vigilance, heroism. 3/4. If you play him on the ground, he has piloting of a cost of 2 and vigilance, heroism. And then attached unit gains on attack, discard a card from the defending player's deck. If that card costs 3 or less, draw a card. Interesting. He's a 1/3 as well, as far as stats he adds to whatever he's piloting. So interesting upside. I mean, discarding a card from your opponent's deck is always good. Does he go in the Satine mill deck? Yeah, probably, I guess. And then, maybe letting you draw a card too is always good. So seems strong. He is a rare. I think he'll end up in a good amount of pilot decks.
I really like this card because a lot of what we've seen so far, as far as like the units with the piloting trait, they typically have a lackluster either stat line or trade-off if you do deploy them to the ground. Mm-hmm. And yes, there's no additional keywords or anything, but I have played many a units in my time that were just a vanilla 3-cost 3/4 because that's like the fine stat line. So the fact that this is a 3-cost 3/4 in the deck that you're running it in, and it has both the rebel and the pilot traits, which I think are very important, is already, I think, just tons of upside. The +1/+3 is a little lackluster as far as, the upgrade stats when you pay for 3, but the on attack, I think, is just insanely good if you're a vigilance player. You can accelerate a game plan where you're trying to deplete their deck. So in a double blue deck, I would love to include this, even if you're not doing the Satine thing. Double blue control decks that are running the Vigilance Legendary as a secondary win con if the game goes long would love this the same way that they typically love Kanan, right? So you could run this in a deck where you attach this to some sort of vehicle, and then you also have Kanan on the ground. And now, 2 attacks a turn, you're milling stuff, and then gaining health and drawing cards to advance your control game plan. There's just a lot that this does for, what I think of when I think of double blue vigilance control.
I think what you really need to keep in mind with stuff like this is a lot of the original ships in the game, a lot of the Spark of Rebellion ships. Putting Andor on Bright Hope makes it a 3/9 Sentinel in space. Yep. That's massive. His piloting cost is only 2, so it's 2 for 1-3 in stats plus the ability. So it is good. All the piloting costs so far seems to be equivalent or a little bit less than the starting cost. So I wonder if that's a trend or not. Just something I noticed. What were you going to say?
Yeah, well, the one that I jumped to, because again, I was thinking from like the double blue standpoint, but I do love your Bright Hope one. Was this is just so good as an opener on a restored arc. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
What I think of is like you open with a restored arc, and then if you've got initiative and you can play this first so that you take it outside of the range of them being able to remove it. Now you've got a 3/6 that on attack restores health from your base, potentially draws you a card and discards a card from their deck, right? Like that is an engine early on. And again, it's on attack. It's not even like when it damages a base. So you can still use that if they play into the space to contest things and control the skies, and you're still getting all of those benefits. Like that's a solid opener. Yeah,
I mean, you put this thing even on like an A-wing, right? Green Squadron A-wing. It's hitting for 4. It's essentially it's a 4/6 that discards from their deck and maybe draws you a card. Like, I think pilots are going to be a big part of a potential aggro strategy too, depending on how you play them with that. Some that early in the game, you don't want to spend money on like confiscate or something that early in the game to get rid of it, and then you still have the A-wing to worry about. So I think it's a great card. I think it's there's going to be a lot of scary stuff in space to worry about, and he's definitely kind of one of the scariest ones we've seen so far. Man, him and Chewie in the same deck, yikes. All right, moving on to General Draven. Tell us about General Draven.
I love General Draven. General Draven is a 5-cost ground unit that is only command, so you can play him in your Heroism and Villainy lists. Has a 2/5 stat line, has the Rebel and Official traits. Again, that's really relevant on the Villainy side if you are looking for those officials to turn on your Royal Guard. And then the text on this rare unit says, when played and on attack, create an X-Wing token. So you get a 2/5, and then you're going to get that 1/1 token, and then every time that you get to attack, you get another 1/1 X-Wing token. And I love this card because it is so versatile, right? It's a Rebel, and it makes, tokens that even if they're X-Wing tokens are still going to be relevant, so you can play them in Rebel Swarm decks, but it's also an official that makes X-Wing tokens, so you could play it in an Imperial list. I just love that you kind of get to do whatever you want with him.
He looks like another strong limited card, another strong draft card. Being able to put stuff on the ground and in space at the same time in a limited environment seems really, really good. I wonder if he's going to run into the same problem in a constructed environment that cards like Kraken do from Twilight, where you play them with your 5 resources. They make a little bit of stuff, but then they have to attack. And are you going to get the value from that as much as you get the value from some other 5 drops that are, much more established, right? So I do wonder how strong he's going to be in a constructed environment. But again, limited, I think he can really shine just because of simply putting something in both arenas right when he drops.
Yeah, I think what's going to end up making the difference and why I think Kraken is a little less impressive in my mind is ultimately whether or not we get stuff that supports X-Wings, right?
Sure.
So Kraken, the droids don't have like a good blanket buff, I guess I'll say. Like there's stuff that you can build around, and obviously there's like cards like Commander Cody who his stocks are just going up this set. But I really think we're going to get something that buffs X-Wings.
I mean, we should, right? We've gotten a lot of stuff that buffs sort of the common traded things in other sets, so it'd make sense if we had that for this. But yeah, neat card. I like that we're getting more X-Wing token generation. Again, like maybe an Akbar. Who knows? Maybe. Make more and more X-Wings. Make 2 per turn. It could be cool.
That would be silly.
Let's move on.
Because your coordinate would be insane.
I know, right? Yeah, throw some coordinate stuff in there. Ayla Secura just jumps in and starts like murking people. I don't know. It's great. But we've got 6 for a 4/5 in our resupply carrier. Another command-only card. This one's Imperial Vehicle Capital Ship. And get this, when played, you may put the top card of your deck into play as a resource. And sure, it comes in exhausted because that's how resources normally come into play unless said otherwise. But hey, it's kind of middle of the game ramp. It's a 4/5 in space, which is a decent stat line too. I think this one could see some use, in terms of trying to get to that big late game resource number.
Yeah. When I saw this, I was less thrilled, but now that I've seen Admiral Piet, I actually really like this, because what this does is you can run it in a Piet list, and even if you don't have like a big impactful play when you deploy him, like, and end case scenario is like you can still use him to ramp into this, and then you get your kind of like perma ramp if Piet gets removed.
Yeah.
So you're not getting the full 2 cost reduction, but you got halfway there permanently by just ramping again. It kind of reminds me of the way that Han 1, you use his ability to resupply on turn 1, and like you're down the card but you're up the ramp, and that's good enough, right? So
Sure.
it's almost like a mid-game version of that combo, but you get the 4/5 body out of it as well, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, on resource turn 3, you play resupply, you go up to 4 resource. Next turn, you put down your resources, you're at 5. You flip Piet, you play this for 4, because it gets a discount of 2. Sure, you have 1 resource left over, but then you're jumping up to a total of 7 resources the next turn. So with the right ramp, Piet could be dropping giant ships very, very quickly, and I think this could be a core part of that strategy. So you're kind of going all in on ramp, but hey, if you're starting to play stuff like Relentless, 3 turns into the game, that's not bad, 3 or 4 turns into the game. It's
Avenger
kinda,
or whatever,
yeah, it's kind of crazy. So I'm excited about this one. I think it plays into the Piet strategy specifically, and again, I'm just excited to see what people can do with Piet. It's gonna be fun.
Also, just passing thought, one of my favorite cards that I try to shoehorn into way more decks than I probably should, I think, and maybe I just told on myself by starting that way.
Okay.
Maybe he doesn't belong here, but I love the set 1 Admiral Piet.
Yeah,
and I love that we are ramping into capital ships, and if you play the 2 cost unit, and now you can give these things ambush where you get that immediate value. Suddenly, that's because this card gets infinitely better if you're ambushing with it, and that's the cutoff is 6. It's 6 or more, right? So I could also see where your turn 1 is an Admiral Piet, and then you're just setting up ramp, deploy Piet into this to ramp more, go.
Mm-hmm. Piet ECL.
Yeah.
It's even more ambush. We got the unit, we got the base, we got everything. It's ambush ramp Piet. Oh man. That sounds scary, and I like it. Well, here is another official for us to chat about a little bit. Go ahead.
All right, so this is Allegiant General Pride. This is a 2 cost ground unit that is aggression and villainy. Has a 2/3 stat line, and the traits are first order and official, which I do find funny because the Emperor's Royal Guard can still be turned on by this, but it's first order. When indirect
showed up
damage,
later, I guess.
yeah, I mean somehow he returned. When indirect damage is dealt to a unit, you may defeat a non-unique upgrade on it. So before we even get to the second part of the text, if you're trying to think through what that does, it means if something takes indirect damage, you could remove an experience token or a shield token, right? Those are non-unique upgrades. But his text doesn't stop there. On attack, if you have the initiative, deal 2 indirect damage to a player. That is an insanely aggressive card, because if they are trying to keep their units and you have initiative, this is swinging for 4, right? If you start the game and this is your turn 1 drop and then you just take initiative, that is a 4 damage attack opener.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, you'll have to keep this card in mind with some of the other ones we'll take a look at, because indirect damage is something that's going to be definitely something to watch out for in this set. But I agree. I mean, I look at this stuff, I'm like, maybe if I'm making Piet red, which I think is a thing, maybe this guy would definitely go in there. Otherwise, more indirect damage is always good, right? More being able to get rid of shield tokens, because remember, indirect damage doesn't hit shields. It just goes right through them. And so this is a way you can do that. And now your opponent has a shielded unit, and they're like, well, man, if I put a damage on it, that also takes out the shield too now, and so it gets awkward for sure as far as your opponent making good choices around their indirect damage. So I'm excited about that one too. All right, moving on to this one. Well, hey, here you go. I didn't know it was coming up next. The Devastator. It's an 8-cost aggression, villainy, Imperial vehicle capital ship. It is a Star Destroyer hunting the rebellion. 9/6 is the stat line for 8. And the first text says, you assign all indirect damage you deal to opponents. So they don't get to choose anymore. You assign it all. You want to assign it all to their base? Go for it. You want to assign it all to their board? Go for it. When played, too, deal 4 indirect damage to each opponent. So has that nice little Twin Suns vibe where you can hit everybody with it. That's great. But in the 1v1 setting, 4 damage is a lot, right? Especially if you can choose exactly where it goes. You get a 9/6 for 8, and you get kind of like a mini overwhelming barrage kind of along with it. So, you know, this is one where I think if you're looking at stuff to ramp out with Piet, this is going to be kind of on the top of your list. It's a card that this alone made me kind of think, maybe I kind of want to go red, actually, even though green and blue are sort of the colors you naturally gravitate towards with what exists already on the Villainy Capital Ship side. But this is super tempting. What a great card.
Yeah, I 100% agree with this being enough to tempt. Between the 2-drop that we just covered, this and cards like Ruthless Raider, I do think that when you are building the Admiral Pia leader deck, you are likely going to be saying, okay, what do I want my end game to be? Am I ramping to Avenger or am I ramping to Devastator? And then you just build from there because both have their pros and cons. But this card is incredibly powerful. I also like this in non-ramp lists as a potential finisher. So like in a mid-range yellow list, what I think about is cards like Sneak Attack, right? Sneak attacking this in a turn early, but also getting the 4 indirect damage that you get to assign, and then potentially, because it would enter ready, dealing 9, right? If your opponent takes initiative and you can sneak attack this in and take, 13 health off of their base, that is insane. So I think that we're going to see this card one way or another in the meta. It's just good.
It's a big body with always 100% hitting for a cause I believe in, baked in. Like that is a finisher for sure. And our first legendary of the set too, I think we should say. So, a lot of times we've seen that legendary spot sort of used for cards that are kind of build around cards, not necessarily maybe the strongest things in Constructed sometimes, but cards that make you want to build a deck around it, like Endless Legions. This is just a straight up strong card. This is just a legendary card in power too. So moving on to our second legendary of the set, and funny enough, one that works really well with the card we just took a look at.
Yeah. This is Planetary Bombardment. It is a 6-cost aggression tactic. You deal 8 indirect damage to a player, but if you control a capital ship, deal 12 instead. So 6 for 8 is already pretty good rate, especially when some of that can land on the base. 6 for 12 is kind of nutty. And again, if for whatever reason, after you've played your Devastator, it survives and you haven't killed your opponent, playing this when you have a Devastator means you get to deal 12 and you get to assign it to wherever you want, which is also just nutty. But I'm glad they made this a legendary, if only because this is the kind of card that just destroys limited games. If you, even without a capital ship, if you can pay 6 to deal 8 in limited, a lot of time that's just going to be like either a one-sided board wipe or a ton of base damage.
Well, I mean, I look at this card and I think to myself, like, man, I would just put this in any aggro or any sort of red mid-range deck I would play, because you play it on 6, essentially, if you're playing it on curve, right? That's the general hero flip turn a lot of times. So this is kind of your red answer to Rivals Fall almost, where they flip their leader, you play this, and then they have to make that choice between either assigning a ton of damage to their leader or whatever else is out, or putting a ton of damage on your base, and then whatever you have out can kind of either finish them off or execute kind of a cleanup thing to take back the board. So I think this is just a great sort of swing card for aggressive red decks that are a little bit lower to the ground too. 6 is such a great cost for this to fit right in that category. So I'm really excited about just putting this in a lot of aggro decks,
Yeah, I'm excited for that. I'm also excited. So this is going to sound kind of weird. I'm really excited for the indirect damage mechanic because it actually revives some additional older stuff that has often been overlooked in my mind. So specifically, when I think of the Identity of Vigilance, we have historically had a lot of cards that heal damage from your units, and they've just been underplayed or not played at all.
Right.
And if indirect damage becomes incredibly popular, a lot of those stuff that heal your units become much more versatile, right? Or even just leaders. Like I think about Obi-Wan from set 3, where like you could heal, but what's the big deal? But now, like if that's eating up an indirect damage every turn, and then once he's flipped, you're also sending it back some way. That's a lot more relevant, right? So I do like that by introducing this new mechanic, you're also in a way making some of those older cards a lot more palatable.
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is just kind of the joy of having a larger card pool. We're going to have 4 sets of cards out for this game now. So the deck building is just going to go crazy, right? And where the pilots make you go back and look at a lot of the older ships and think about the value you could get from putting somebody on that ship, I agree where this is kind of a similar thing, right? Where you start to think, okay, well, what can I do now that I could play that's really good into indirect damage that I wasn't really playing a lot of before? So, yeah, interesting to think about. All right, moving on to Anakin Skywalker. Only an uncommon, oh well, but he's just young Anakin. It's 2 cost for a cunning heroism character, 2/3 on the ground, but piloting, pay 2 for cunning heroism piloting attachment. Attached unit is a 2/3 stat line force fringe pilot. When the attached unit completes an attack and survives, you may return this upgrade to its owner's hand. So you can throw them down there, 2 for a 2/3 buff for a turn on a ship, attack with the ship, and then bounce them back to your hand if you want to play on a different ship, maybe that same turn even, or to just have in your hand to keep them safe for later. So, it is spinning. The subtitle is I'll try spinning for this card, which is great, by the way. But you can kind of spin them between the board and your hand a little bit too. So very, very thematic. I really like what they did with this one.
I really like this card for limited.
Oh yeah.
When you consider, again, like this is one of those ones where the stat line is just solid. Worst case scenario, it's a 2 for a 2/3, so you can still get your turn 1 play. But when you have a bunch of potential tokens, ships and whatever, and it's limited, and you're in one of those positions where you don't have a lot to do with your turn, or you've got extra resources, being able to swing with an X-wing or swing with a TIE fighter. But for extra damage, bounce this to your hand, then just replay it on another one and swing.
Yeah.
That accelerates the game clock pretty fast.
Oh,
and
totally.
It only takes 3 ships or 3 vehicles, let's say, to turn this into a potential like pay 6 to deal 6 damage to somebody. Mm-hmm. And when you look at it through that lens, like that's a big deal.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the first thing I thought about with this as well. I just keep this in my hand, and then when I have a couple ships out late game with, Sabine Cunning, for instance, maybe, I just play it multiple times. Play it on your A-Wing, attack, do 5 damage, bounce it back. Play it on your Red 3, you do 5 damage again, bounce it back. Like this is potentially a huge amount of damage. And on top of all of that, I think it is nice too that it is just a 2 for a vanilla 2/3 on the ground if you need that. Worst case scenario, you just don't draw anything good for your turn 1 play. You can just put a decently statted body on the ground and contest that arena a little bit. So I think that's useful to have. You don't get to bounce him if you play him on the ground, right? Because it's a piloting thing. But just the ability in an emergency to have a 2 for a 2/3 is strong in itself.
One of the other things that I'm curious about, because I don't remember if it was covered when they first introduced us to the piloting mechanic, do the ships inherit the tags of the upgrade, or
They do not. No, the traits do not imprint on the ship. The traits are for the attachment alone, the upgrade alone,
or the unit if you play them to the ground. Because I was,
that's right.
Looking, and this has that all important force tag while being relatively cheap.
Yeah.
Right. So with that force tag, what I was thinking about was, in the past, we'd only had like Grogu was our turn 1 force unit. But now this, again, it's a vanilla 2/3. But when you start considering I can turn on Jedi lightsaber on the next turn if I just play him to the ground, that's still relevant.
Yeah, totally. I think all the way back to my set 1 Jyn Erso list, that was just good statted bodies and Jedi stuff. And I put him in here as a ground unit for sure. It's kind of neat to think about, but that is a good call out. The force trait is a pretty valuable one on this. All right, moving on. Tell us about the Blade Squadron B-Wing.
The Blade Squadron B-Wing is a space unit. It costs 3. It is heroism and cunning. Has a 3/3 stat line. It is a rebel vehicle fighter, but when played, if another player controls 3 or more exhausted units, give a shield token to a unit. So it can be given to itself, could be given to something else. This is a card that to me just screams Akbar. because if you use Akbar to exhaust an enemy unit, and then they also then get the token, that token's going to enter play exhausted as well. So you can get somebody to 3 or more exhausted units pretty quickly with Akbar if you really want to give something a shield token.
Right. And I mean, I look at this too, and I look at something like even like the Mandalorian, you know, for a leader that relies on exhausting things too, where you're, you know, playing stuff, exhausting things. Maybe you get a chance to drop this and then put a shield token on your leader or something, right? I think there's some tricky things you could do with this card. I think it requires a lot of setup. There's a good amount of hoops to jump through with it. I think Akbar is kind of the most obvious, you know, way to get this online, but I think if we dig a little bit more, we could probably find some other opportunities too. But I am curious to see how much use this one is going to get, because it's got decent stats. 3 for a 3/3 in space is fine. But will the hoops be too much to jump through in the end for it to see kind of regular play? It might be better in limited, although there's not a lot of limited, you know, situations where your opponent has 3 things out. You know, usually you deal with smaller boards, I think, in that format. But I think it's a cool card to think about, right? Think about how can I produce this scenario, and make sure that shield counts too. Yeah. All right. Well, moving on to it's a trap. It's a gambit as well. 3 for heroism cunning event here with a lovely Admiral Akbar looking very surprised directly at us. He stares into your soul on this card. He wants you to know deep down. He wants your ancestors to know that this is a trap. With the way that look is just piercing into my very being. Yeah. If an opponent controls more space units than you, ready each space unit you control. Okay. That seems it's simple. Oh, it's a rare, by the way. It's simple. It seems to be potentially very strong. It's the type of thing where it's thematic, where if the dark side manages to swarm a lot of ships, you have the ability to essentially attack twice with whatever's left over. We know there's tie tokens in the set, so maybe there's going to be more ways to generate those. But I think this card is interesting, right? It's another one of those cards that has a good amount of hoops to jump through, right? Your opponent has to have more space units than you, but I wonder how often you'll really see an opportunity for this card to work out, because I think when it does, it could be really good. But if it doesn't, it could be like an auto resource kind of thing. What do you think about this one?
I do like this as a potential like a potential one of in some lists, and if I'm running the Admiral Akbar leader, I think I might want to run 2 or 3 and it just be something that if I get it early, I probably resource, and then if I get it late, I might look to play into it. And again, the reason I mentioned Akbar, besides the it's a trap thing, is that it's just really easy to enable when you can donate units to your opponent in space, right? And in doing so, you're also, if you're activating the Akbar leader, you are exhausting one of their units, and so they are going to get that, and then the unit they get is also exhausted. So when you ready all your units, they're not going to be able to respond, hopefully, right? The timing is going to be important for when you play this, but it's just one of those things where it's probably worth at least a slot or 2 when you're playing Akbar, because the ceiling for this is very high, right? It's one of those cards that when it works, it's going to work. It's going to be a blowout. And if the worst case scenario is I have to, resource it 9 other times when I see it, but I steal a game, it's probably still worth the slot.
That's kind of where I'm leaning towards with this one, but I want to put it into practice. I want to get my hands on some stuff and actually get some games in, because I think this is going to be one that needs some reps to really kind of determine where it falls. Neat card though, and again, classic art. This needs to be a playmat. Where's my? I need it. It's a trap playmat. Fantasy Flight, make it happen. It's beautiful. Let's talk about the Independent Smuggler.
Independent Smuggler is a 1-cost ground unit, but it has piloting, so it's more than just that. Now, the ground unit itself is a 1/1 body. It has Raid 1 as a keyword. Also, this is just cunning, by the way. So this is a 1-cost 1/1 cunning unit, 1/1 Raid 1. But when piloting, and the piloting cost is just 1 as well, the unit gets +1/+1, and the attached unit gets Raid 1. Now, it has Underworld and Pilot tags. It's also a common, and that's where I think this will really shine, because when I consider the limited format, right? Like a 1/1 with raid 1 is not the worst, one drop in the game.
It's not bad.
But being able to just pay 1 and essentially give something, a 2/1 stat line when you're attacking with it is very, very good.
Yeah, for sure. It's a nice little aggressive card, and then like you said, if you don't have anything else to play on turn 1 of the game, it's not going to be bad. So I agree that we're seeing another kind of limited winner there. Not much else to say about that. Yeah.
No.
It's like a decent, solid pilot card. But then I guess we should say too, it's good to see just good pilot cards come out, right? We're going to have to see a lot of pilot cards in this set, I would imagine, because it is the main keyword. And so getting some that are just kind of good in a general sense, they don't do anything crazy, they just give you numbers, is a good thing to see. All right, let's talk about the Quasar TIE Carrier. 6 for a villainy only card, so you can go in any villainy deck. 6 for a villainy 5/7 Imperial Vehicle capital ship again for Piet. On attack, create a TIE Fighter token, and there you go. There's our ways to make TIE Fighter tokens. And so if you the Charmer Dream scenario here, right? You have a Piet leader, you have Piet unit out as well. This costs 6. It would get ambushed from the Piet unit. You drop it down for 4 resources. You attack with ambush. You create a TIE Fighter token. This card gives you, value on value on value, right? So it's a fun one. I think this looks like a neat include to a lot of capital ship decks. 6 for 5/7 is not a bad stat line to begin with, and making token is always nice. I think it just seems like another solid common. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that it's a great common. I really like that it's just villainy, which means that you get a lot of versatility for where you want to include it. Has the Imperial tag, so even if you go to Twin Suns or combining it with older sets, right, you get that Tarkin or those other synergy. But what I just really like is that even if you're not running, Piet the unit, Piet the leader, what you want for a card like this, in my opinion, is it to be 6 or less, because you might see a situation where this still gets played because it's an okay ECL target, right?
Sure, yeah.
If this suddenly has ambush, right, 5/7 stat line ambushing into something is likely going to remove something, and this survives. And then because you get the on attack as well, you also just get the free TIE Fighter token. It's a lot of value. And as you said, where it shines potentially is in limited, being a common. 5/7 stat line means it's likely to stick around. We haven't seen a lot of stuff that is, blowing up capital ships yet. I think we'll see that at some point, because, we're seeing a lot of these big, hefty ships. But right now it looks very sticky, which means you're likely to get a TIE Fighter or 2 out of it.
It does certainly seem that way. Yeah, we'll have to see how everything plays out numbers-wise in the space game after all the cards are revealed. But it seems like a card to keep an eye on for sure. And it's just nice to see more support for the things that have been announced on the leader side too. So very cool. And back to the beginning. So that's it. That's our spoilers so far. And, we're recording this it is currently 5:10 p.m. Pacific time on January 15th, 2025. So chances are there'll probably be some spoilers that have come out between when we recorded this and when you watched. So apologies for not getting those out there. But that is, it do be like that sometimes, as they say. Yeah. But yeah, I think overall, just a ton of exciting stuff, right? We got all the information on the competitive side of the game. We got a lot of planetary qualifiers to look forward to yet this season. Store Showdown season is coming, so we'll have stuff to talk about for that as far as what lists you want to be running into it. And then, set 4 spoilers, man. I mean, I've never been so excited about the game. I love space combat. From the very beginning, I've wanted pilots we could put on ships, and we're getting that, so it's looking great. I'm pretty hyped. I don't have anything else to really say there. Go ahead.
It's not lost on me.
Oh yeah.
We're also one step closer to you getting your pod racing. So that Anakin, listen, when we get pod racers, they're going to be vehicles, and that Anakin can pilot a pod racer in the future. I believe in you.
Not my Now This Is Pod Racing expansion is one step closer to reality. That's true. All right. Well, I think that's going to about do it for us today at Ice Cave Radio. Thanks, everyone, again for watching or listening. Join our Discord. We're still doing Conquer the Cave. The next episode for that comes out next week. We're up to episode 11. We've had people go on like a 3-week win streak. Pretty amazing stuff. And we've got even better players coming, even more fun decks coming with the Twilight of the Republic meta that we're in right now. So join the Discord. Definitely join the community. A lot of chatting going on, too, about various decks in the game. We've got a great group going there, so we'd love to see you in it. Also, I suppose we should say like and subscribe to all of our stuff too. I mean, we kind of, I mean, the more people do that, the better this stuff is going to get. It's simple math. That's just how it works. But I don't have a lot else to add beyond that. You?
May the force be with you.